Another another thing that needs to be said as well about this whole thing to do with 501c3 with the illegal campaign intervention IRS and the whole model of the entire American Constitution from the original Constitution, the model of the original Constitution with elected people in government, officers of government who don't vote, people actually in government who don't vote, certain staff of government who don't vote, because to keep it all impartial. And everything I've said in the other videos really about, the president and the vice president are supposed to be the ones who choose who runs the country and who's in charge of departments and who even checks legitimate voting processes like ballot checking and registration and things like that. So if they're in charge of the entire government and the people that they supposedly choose, or at least the public vote for, that they want to do the job, it seems to me that they're choosing people who aren't competent or capable if they're having to come in through their separate political party in injunction with legal cases, challenging their opponents. It really does seem ridiculous, but this is the thing, right? When it gets to this army of lawyers, right, the political process, the election is non-profit. The election's in pursuit of matters of state, right? It's not like a business for profit. The election is not run for profit, and there shouldn't be any profit made from it. That's why you've got certain officers appointed by the president and vice president, or even by the voters, to check the ballots and that, and then they're meant to be impartial, right? Those persons are employed with a wage, but it's not a for-profit business because it's all funded by the taxpayer. The thing with all these armies of lawyers that they've rented, it's the law. Even though the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are meant to be not for profit, they're supposed to be running on donations and all these other non-profit companies that are supposed to be not for profit, and so forth. The thing is that when they hire these private lawyers, private attorneys, even armies of them, for purposes of the non-profit campaign, and get them to even challenge the government's assessment, the ballot officers' assessment, the election agent's assessment, the Attorney General, all these people who are in public office on a wage, not for profit. A wage is being compensated for your time. It's not for profit. You're not making something on top of extra. You've got a certain skill or level, and you're compensated based on what you're worth, right? For your time, your skills. A wage isn't a business. Employees of the government are not for profit, they're for wage. Now, how is it that the president and the vice president, who are supposedly supposed to, direct and appoint the government, why are the exact two people in this election hiring private persons, and those private persons are for profit? Why are those for-profit lawyers, because they don't do it out of the goodness of their heart, why are they acting on behalf of the Democratic Party, which is meant to be not-for-profit, and making a profit out of an election in some way? And not just a couple of them, loads of them. Nobody, right, is meant to profit from the electoral process. No one is meant to profit from it. It is paid for by the taxpayer, and in fact, in the 1688 Bill of Rights, it says that elections ought to be free, right? So, and all of the people who run it and check it and run the machinery of it are under government wages. So they're not for profit. They're not taking something out of it. But these lawyers they're bringing in, the Republican and Democrat parties are going to be running purely on donations, right? To cover their activities and funds. And even if that money covers the activities and funds of the lawyers they're hiring, but the lawyers they're hiring are making a profit out of the whole process. And that's why 503c matters. That's why it matters. But it matters because anyone who acts in any way against another political campaign other than voting against it or impartially checking it. Now you might say, well, the judge in the trial is impartially checking it, but they've ended up getting some of these people to be members of and vote for parties and encourage it. So they actually really in their mind, they are pro for parties. The original constitution had certain office holders not being allowed to vote. It made it, the whole process, impartial. Like, you know, councillors sign selflessness policies, supposedly, which I've said in the last video, it just, the mind boggles at how you can sign a selfless policy and then be representing only your electors, but yet you're going into the council with all these party manifestos and agendas and policies from some headquarters somewhere else in the country, which isn't the electors who elected you. Even if there's the only legal tie really that any councillor who votes in council has got with a political party in law after they've signed a selfless policy is that a certain percentage of the electors voted support that party and voted for that person because they represent that party. But the thing is that, you know, in every single independent decision, you'll have to assess the evidence, and all of the electors will definitely not have the same opinion on everything that gets put on the table to vote on, or else you're kind of like saying you'll agree to it before you've even seen the evidence. You can't have a jury that say, oh, we'll go with guilty on all these cases, you know, because we're all Democrats, when they haven't seen the evidence for each individual case. It just doesn't work. There is a critical flaw in the whole thing. And going back to 501c, it's all about tax and money and non-profits taking actions or making actions in opposition or against parties. The thing is, a legal challenge is you're going against a defendant. You're moving, it's a motion against someone else. It doesn't matter whether that person has broken the law or not, or they owe you money or not, it's still against them. You know, because if it wasn't against them, then you would be trying to help them prove that they didn't do what you accused them of, right? I can't see how, right? This is the critical thing. Those, at the end of the day, the election is an entire process that it's not private. It's public. It's not privately owned. It's public. It's all paid for. And it's got staff paid for by the taxpayer, or they volunteer, right? They volunteer. Many people in polling stations volunteer, or they are on the government payroll, right? Now, the problem is, are all those armies of attorneys, right, who are acting for the non-profit Democrat Party that is meant to be donation funded or whatever, are all those lawyers volunteering? You know, are they all volunteering like the people who count the ballots and so forth? No, they're not. They're actually doing it not just to try and help their claimant prove that the other party cheated. They're taking some money out of it as well, right? They're taking money out of it for profit and not just to cover their costs. They're not. that those lawyers will not just be compensated to cover their costs. They're working for law firms that take an actual profit out of it, and that is illegal under 501(c)(3). That is the point of why it exists. I've got a PDF file on it, not just what the IRS show you. It goes into a lot more detail, and it actually, when you read it and understand what it is actually saying and what it actually means, each bit of it, on what it extends to and what it covers, like even voicing or whatever against that party, it is an act for or against. You're trying to prove that party cannot take part in the election. You're not trying to help them prove that they can take part in the election. It's still identified as a human act against that entity, to try and stop them doing what they're doing, but not with impartiality. Even if the judge is impartial, the party bringing it is bringing a non-impartial action to raise the suit, with an intention to attempt to prove that this party they're really trying to have evidence that this party did not follow the rules, right? Where, in contrast, the people who work for the government or volunteer and they're checking all the ballots and they're counting them and they're submitting them and they're checking that everyone qualified and filled everything in properly and they did it legitimately and properly, right? The mediators, they don't have the intention to try and prove a particular specific party didn't do it. They're checking both parties. Now, this is the thing. When you bring a suit against someone, even if you're not the judge who's impartial, the person who brought it is not impartial. The person who brings the suit is, the whole point in them raising the case is to, with an absolute objective, to prove that other party didn't do it. The motion has an intention. They're not, they have a side. They have a side. And they are not, and that's the thing with the people who check the election, who are meant to be checking the election. They are the ones who bring and raise the case, and it's a little bit like the Crown Prosecution Service. If you think of the Crown Prosecution Service, right, the police are meant to be impartial and only act if someone broke the law. And then the Crown Prosecution Service have got the weighing scales. They're meant to check and see if there's evidence that someone did break the law and if they can prosecute them. But if there's evidence that they didn't, they're supposed to not prosecute them. Even though they're the prosecutor, the whole department is based on still only doing it if, they're meant to be acting on behalf of the public interest, right? I think that's the word. The Crown Prosecution Service in England are meant to be acting in the interests of the public. So they don't act kind of like as if a private person brought a prosecution. If a private person brings a prosecution, right, he himself feels that he has been offended, right? And someone broke the law against him. And when he gets a private prosecutor, he takes it on he really wants to prove that someone broke the law against him, right? It's not a general sense of the public interest like the Crown Prosecution Service do want to see if someone did or did not break the law. But if there's some evidence that they might not have done, then they've got to, act impartially. But with an individual being a private prosecution, they're trying their hardest to prove their objective is to prove that the other person broke the law, whereas the Crown Prosecution Service is to prove that, is it in the public interest to prosecute that person and check whether they did or did broke the law, and if there's something to show that they might not have done, then their own policies aren't that they're going to pursue it. So kind of in a way, the Democratic Party being a party which has persons of one political affiliation is more kind of like an individual person wanting to prosecute someone criminally, as opposed to the CPS, who weigh up and check under fairness whether someone should be prosecuted in the public interest. And this is the thing: if Biden and Kamala are not happy and content with the assessment of those authorities they've got in place to check the registration on ballot access and counting of ballots, then what are they doing as the president and the vice president? Doesn't that prove that the government isn't that evidence? If Harris and Biden think that Jill Stein and Kennedy don't qualify for ballot access and they've been cheating, and those people who check the ballots, why aren't they taking action against them? Why aren't they being sacked? Why aren't they being banned from working in ballot access? Why aren't they being banned from counting ballots? Why aren't the Attorney General being fired? Why isn't the case against the Attorney General? Why is it vehemently targeted against their opposition party? Why isn't it against their own government staff? Why hasn't Biden sacked the Attorney General? What it seems to me is, if Stein and Kennedy qualified according to the mediators, the impartial staff, then doesn't that reflect that Kamala Harris and Biden aren't happy with their own government in the last whatever years? They're not happy with themselves. They can't be happy with their own government. They can't be happy with their own administration. They can't be happy with themselves, because the own government that they're in charge of is not doing its job properly, and they take it out on Kennedy. Why aren't their army of lawyers prosecuting, the Attorney General or their own staff? If the Attorney General is meant to be the lawyer of the government, then if the lawyer of the government is, I know that some of them have been up in front of Rand Paul, the Senate. They get up in front of the Senate. Why aren't these persons who apparently approved Kennedy and Jill Stein's ballot access, why aren't they up in front of Rand Paul? Why isn't Rand Paul grilling them like Fauci under government paid money, because Rand Paul is paid by the taxpayer to grill them? Why is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden bringing in independent private lawyers who are all making a profit out of the election? It seems like it's good business to challenge elections, because there's a lot of money to be made into it out of a non-profit process, which the entire thing is supposed to exist, paid for by the taxpayer, and the taxpayer pay for staff to check it and judges to judge it. So where are the, where are these lawyers coming in? It's all funded by the Democrat Party. If the lawyers are funded by Democrat members, funds gone into the Democrat Party by donors and persons all affiliated with their party, then aren't the lawyers at the whim and beck and call of the Democrat Party? Therefore, aren't the lawyers acting as Democrats? If you've been hired to act and work for Democrats, then aren't you therefore a democratic entity? The Attorney General is not meant to be a democratic entity. The judge is not meant to be a democratic entity. The prosecutors aren't meant to be a democratic entity. The people checking the ballots aren't meant to be a democratic entity. May it well be that the Democrats seem to be going against everyone who's not a democratic entity. Even when they put on the president outfit and the vice president outfit, and they've got their own Attorney General and their own staff that they employed, they're not happy with them. It's kind of almost like you've got this kind of doppelganger thing, isn't it? It's almost kind of like there's two Kamala Harrises and two Joe Bidens. There's Camilla and Joe, the president and the vice president, who have got, people that they want to work in government because they trust them and you can trust this government. And then you've got Camilla and Joe, who are the Democratic Party, Camilla and Joe, who aren't happy with, what this government is doing. So they're getting their own private lawyers in to prosecute them. Which Camilla and Joe Biden are running the country? The Democrat Camilla and Joe or the President Camilla and Joe? This is the thing. How can you? It says elections ought to be free, right? But that includes every aspect of them, the whole thing, from top to bottom. It includes running them. It includes, the polling stations, the check-in. It includes all the. It actually includes the judge's wage and really the Attorney General and so forth, doesn't it? That's the point. It ought to be free. But what's actually happening is that the Democrat voters are giving money to the Democrats, some of which money is going to fund these lawyers, army of lawyers. So aren't all of the Democrat voters who go to the ballot box paying for the election to be tried in court, right? And the other parties, at least their entry to it, because surely the registration part of it is the government side of it. It's not like the private fundraising part of it. The registration part, at the point when you pick the pen up and at the office of the government and you're filling it in, that point is governed by the government, not the independent party. So it's not free, is it? The prosecution of Kennedy, any aspect of Kennedy not qualifying for being on the ballot ought to be free, and that's why it's checked by volunteers or government staff. It has to be, because it says in the Bill of Rights, it says that elections ought to be free, but they're not free, are they? It's costing the Democrat voters money that they're paying. They're paying for the ballot checking and trying twice. That they're checking. That they're paying the government, right, to run the election and check it and prosecute it, and then they're also paying the Democrats to get it checked and try it. So any Democrat voter, right, is getting tax money taken off him from federal government, right? What is paid the Attorney General to try the election when people didn't qualify to get on it, but then Camilla and Joe are also taking money off people for their private lawyers to try it as well. So you're paying twice. The public are getting charged, or at least the Democrats are getting charged twice for the same thing. When it says elections ought to be free, including surely administrating them ought to be free. And also criticising them surely ought to be free as well. Surely criticising elections ought to be free, because the police are free. That 501c3 thing is there for a complete and total purpose. And when you bring all the financial part of it into it, it makes sense. And the original constitution, where certain government office persons aren't allowed to vote because they're not allowed to take a side. So I just think that it's. I think that there's some fatal flaws in this whole Biden-Camilla thing, and I think that it's the same as Tony Blair, with his judge's oath thing, and introducing negotiated justice, deals for justice, when it says that you can't do favours for justice or in respect to person's conscience or plea, only based on evidence that is obtained and applied law, not on deals and negotiations. Otherwise, it's not, justice isn't served, is it? And also that Liberty of London Magna Carta thing, when you're not allowed to have any tolls or fines in London, and if they want to cut the congestion charge down and the traffic, then they'll have to think of a way that's lawful, not one that's against the current laws that are in place. There's you can have, there's infinite ideas you can have how to cut pollution and traffic. We've got noise now. I've got noise now here. It's just appeared. It started after the pandemic, and it wasn't there before. I know. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, just stream of cars coming past. Where are they going? Where have they come from? Who are they? We can't live like this. We used to have like Sundays when it was like meant to be no. Sunday was like silent. It's supposed to be religious day, and they even scrapped that for profit and commerce.